So about a year ago, I met this girl through mutual friends. We were out as a group, and she told me drunkenly at this bar that toxic masculinity can be hot, that she's attracted to guys sometimes who can be toxic men. And I thought it was a ridiculous thing to say in the moment because I was like, you're basically admitting to being attracted to negative qualities and toxic qualities. And that explains your dating life. Like she has had disastrous situations with men, and I'm like, but you're still like, I would be traumatized by some of this stuff she's been through. Like, I'm talking guys who are partnered to her had babies with another chick. Like, to me, that would traumatize me permanently, where I would never think to utter to somebody I'm just meeting, oh yeah, I'm still kind of, I'm attracted to toxic guys. But then I thought, you know what? A, at least she's self-aware about it. And B, I don't know if what she meant was that she's attracted to men who are very like alpha, who then come with these other. I feel like sometimes masculinity is a double-edged sword. It's like sometimes the guys you meet who are the most alpha in terms of like I don't know, let's say tall, built, and like right? Oftentimes those are also the guys who are so limited emotionally in terms of communication, in terms of empathy, sometimes in terms of intellect, right? So I don't know if what she meant was that she's attracted to the guys who are stereotypically masculine and they happen to come with these toxic tendencies, or if she was literally saying like sometimes I'm attracted to those toxic qualities themselves, like a guy who, let's say, takes hours or days to respond, or who will text her at 2 in the morning, for a booty call, but wasn't responding to her earlier in the day when she wanted to get dinner with them or needed their help for something. I don't know. I'm just coming up with an example. But it made me think about this concept recently. Again, like, are we attracted to toxic masculinity? And I think that as a society, we have been taught to be very attracted to the extremes of masculinity and femininity, right? Like in women, it's like we favor women who have very estrogen-based features, who are very delicate and kind and sweet. And those are the qualities that are also very much favored in mothers, right? In mothers, in female partners, and just females in general. And in men, there are these qualities that we associate with traditional masculinity that are very much favored. Again, with dating, the stereotype is like, people who say, I only want a tall guy who's above 6 feet tall, or another thing would be like, he has to make 6 figures, right? This idea of, if he's financially successful, that's the right partner for me because he can provide for me. Even though when we gloss over these details, we're not even talking about the nuances of like, how does he make that money? How long is he going to have this career? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just about how much money you're making now. It's like, what's your long-term plan? Are you able to provide or protect in other ways, right? It's very interesting because, again, for me, it poses this question of, is it possible to be attracted to toxic masculinity? And if you are, is it a subconscious thing, right? If we're taught to be attracted to these concepts of total femininity or total masculinity or both, it can be such an absolute thing that it comes with these archaic pieces that suddenly we're like, oh, but I'm not attracted to that, right? I mean, I've heard women say, I want a man who's going to be the head of the household, who's going to lead and run the show. I believe in that traditional, like, biblical view. Well, then those are women who probably want the man to kind of shut them down and do the power plays if it means following that traditional route of the guy takes the lead. For example, this is like kind of a silly example, but I'm just thinking about how when my grandmother got with my grandfather, eventually she just stopped driving. Like, he was the driver, right? And I'm sure that was part of this old school mindset of, I'm the man, I'm going to lead. This is one arena where I need to feel like I'm the one in charge. I'm the one who drives. And then she never drove again for decades. Of course, that is power that you could get in another way somewhere else, right? But I think it's a good example of how sometimes women will give up their power for the sake of either pleasing a man or maintaining that traditional concept of the man is in the lead. But again, then there's these other nuances where it's not so great. Now my grandmother is on her own and she doesn't know how to drive anymore. Like, she can't get around town anymore. So there's these limitations that she put on herself a long time ago that she's now dealing with the consequences of. With the girl I mentioned earlier, who I met out and about, she now has to deal with the trauma of the emotional trauma of the fact that she was going to start a life with this guy. Like, they were planning on the long-term thing, and then he got some other chick pregnant, and it made the whole relationship explode, right? So I think it's really interesting. I guess there's no like real solution, right? In dating, you're always trying to find, I think you're always kind of weighing the pros versus the cons. And hopefully if there's way more pros than cons, then you made a good choice and it's worth the investment, the emotional investment, the energy you're putting into a connection, and maybe some of the sacrifices that you're making to be in that relationship. But I guess the key factor here is that at some point, you could also be compromising your power. And I think there's something, for every human being, there's something about when we lose our power, we kind of fall apart, and it stifles the human spirit. So I think it's a very interesting thing. I think power comes up in any relationship. I think it comes up in heterosexual relationships. I think it comes up in gay relationships as well. And I'm not sure which is tougher, by the way, because with heterosexual dynamics, there's a traditional sense of who's supposed to have the power, right? The man. So I'm sure that can be very challenging, both for men and women who don't naturally fit that dynamic that we've all been taught to follow. But with gay relationships, it's also really tricky because we're figuring things out as we go. So sometimes I've been in situations where I felt like a guy was way too passive for me, but then you feel bad because you're like, he's a nice guy. Like, I'll take the nice guy over the abusive dominant guy, you know what I'm saying? But with gay guys, there's no blueprint. So it's like you're figuring things out as you go, and you can't train somebody to be something they're not naturally. Sometimes it's just not the right fit, but there's no handbook, is what I'm trying to say. What do you guys think about this? Tell me in the comments.